everyone, this is Seema Chalani, your mentor from KYMS Academy, and I welcome you all once again to this platform. Previous year questions of CAT 24 slot 2 series is going on, and we have discussed 8 questions of verbal ability section, and out of the 4 RCs, 2 have already been discussed, and today we are going to discuss RC 3. So let's get started and together we make it happen. An anonymous quote: "You are not behind, you are just in the process." Now, sometimes when you see somebody growing faster, you feel that you are lagging behind. But the truth is, everyone has his own pace, own way, own process. It doesn't mean you are late or you are failing. You are still learning, growing, and getting there. So keep trusting your journey. So let's get started with another RC. Now, today's RC is about the spices, and the style of RC is analytical. So I'm going to read this RC paragraph, wise paragraph, and then we come down to the questions and solve the questions. Spices were a global commodity centuries before European voyages. There was a complex chain of relations, yet consumers had little knowledge of producers and vice versa. Desire for spices helped fuel European colonial empires to create political, military, and commercial networks under a single power. So in the first line, the author is saying that spices were consumed globally even before the European voyages. And in the next line, author says that there was a complex chain of relationships between the consumers and the producers, and they both knew very little about each other. And this line says that high demand of spices led to the European colonialism. Clear? Historians know a fair amount about the supply of spices in Europe during the medieval period, the origins, methods of transportation, the prices, but less about demand. So whatever sentence is given between the two hyphens, that is something that you can always skim. So what you need to focus is that historians, they knew about the supply of spices, but they did not know about the demand of spices. Why go to such extraordinary efforts to procure expensive products from exotic islands? Now here the author is raising the question that if you are getting something from any attractive island, okay, so why are you going for such expensive things? All right, so basically at the time demands, spices were huge in demand, or because of their demand, they were highly price driven. So here the author is raising a question. Still, demand was great enough to inspire the voyages of Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama, launching the first fateful wave of European colonialism. So in short, here we can say that demand was so high that it actually led to the first fateful wave of European colonialism. Okay, easy. So why were spices so highly priced in Europe in the centuries from about 1000 to 1500? So again here the author is raising the question that what were the reasons because of which the prices of spices were so high. So maybe in this paragraph now we can get the reasons of the high prices of spices. So let us read and see whether we are being right or wrong over here. All right. So one widely disseminated explanation for medieval demand for spices was that they covered the taste of spoiled meat. Medieval purchasers consumed meat much fresher than what the average city dweller in the developed world of today has at hand. However, refrigeration was not available, and some hot spices have been shown to serve as an antibacterial agent. Salting, smoking, or drying meat were other means of preservation. Most spices used in cooking began as medical ingredients, and throughout the Middle Ages, spices were used as both medicines and condiments. Above all, medieval recipes involved the combination of medical and culinary lore in order to balance food's humoral properties and prevent diseases. Most spices were hot and dry and so appropriate in sauces to counteract the moist and wet properties supposedly possessed by most meat and fish. So basically in this paragraph, the author is talking about the reasons of the high prices of spices. So what is the first reason? कि वो जो स्पाइसेस होते थे दे वर यूज टू मास्क द टेस्ट ऑफ स्पॉइल्ड मीट. तो कुछ भी मीट अगर स्पॉइल होता था तो वो उसको कवर करने के लिए यूज किया जाता था. Second use of spices were that because the lack of refrigeration was there, so basically the spices were used as antibacterial agent. It means they were being used as preservatives. Okay. Third reason is even the spices they had the medical properties in them. Okay. And one more reason was there that normally in European cuisine, what they used to do, they used to balance the recipe. Okay. Suppose if beet is there and fish is there, so normally they are wet and moist, and these spices they were dry. So obviously they used to bring both the things together in order to balance the recipe. So these were the 3 or 4 uses of the spices. Where spices came from was known in a vague sense centuries before the voyages of Columbus. Just how vague may be judged by looking at medieval world maps. To the medieval European imagination, the East was exotic and alluring. Medieval maps often place India close to the so-called earthly paradise, the Garden of Eden described in the Bible. So in this paragraph, the author is saying that the people of Europe, they had vague idea about the producers, okay, about the origin of the spices. The demand of spices, it was very high, it was highly priced, but the people did not know the origin of the spices. वो India से रहा था, इतनी दूर से आ रहा था, but still people they did not know about India. Even they could not locate India on the medieval map. Clear? So basically they had little idea about the producer or the origin of the spices. Geographical knowledge has a lot to do with the perceptions of spices, relative scarcity, and the reasons for their high prices. So here, still the author is talking about the reasons of the high prices. जो spices थे वो इतने ज़्यादा valuable क्यों थे? Okay, maybe there could be one reason. First is because they were scarce, क्योंकि वो scarce थे. Second, an example of the varying notion of scarcity is the conflicting information about how pepper is harvested. वहां पर conflicting ideas भी था among people that how it was harvested, how spices were harvested. तो first thing वो scarce था, second को harvest कैसे किया गया. So here the author is talking about a story. As far back as the 7th century, Europeans thought that pepper in India grew on trees guarded by serpents that would bite and poison anyone who attempted to gather the fruit. The only way to harvest pepper was to burn the trees, which would drive the snakes underground. Of course, this bit of lore would explain the shriveled black peppercorns, but not white, pink, or other colors. So here the author says that yes, there was a story about the harvesting of paper. कि वहां पर जब उनको पेपर को हार्वेस्ट करना होता था तो people they used to burn the trees. And in order, why they used to burn the trees? In order to drive the snakes underground also. क्योंकि अगर वो burn नहीं करेंगे तो might be possible that snakes bit them. Okay. So now here the author is again being little skeptic regarding this thing. कि okay, this story tells us about the black peppercorns कि उसको कैसे harvest किया. But then what about the white, pink or other colors peppercorns? क्योंकि अगर आप tree को burn कर रहे हैं तो obviously it cannot convert pink peppercorn into black. So what is the story behind all these things? So basically it's a wild story, or in fact they even did not know that how the things were happening. Clear? Spices never had the enduring allure or power of gold and silver or the commercial potential of new products such as tobacco, indigo or sugar. But the taste for spices did continue for a while beyond the Middle Ages. As late as the 17th century, the English and the Dutch were struggling for control of the Spice Islands. Dutch New Amsterdam or New York was exchanged by the British for one of the Moluccan Islands where nutmeg was grown. Now, in this paragraph, the author says that spices did not have the long-lasting allure as of gold or silver. तो जितना ज़्यादा allure लोगों में gold और silver के लिए था, उतना spices के लिए नहीं था. Nor did it have the commercial potential like tobacco, indigo, or sugar. But then the fact is that the taste for spices did continue. The demand for spices, it continued even after the Middle Ages. And even during the 17th century, the English and the Dutch, they were competing for the Spice Islands. वो ये चाहते थे कि हम में से कौन स्पाइस आइलैंड को कंट्रोल करे. इट मीन्स दे वांटेड टू हैव द डोमिनेशन ओवर द स्पाइस आइलैंड्स. एंड द लास्ट लाइन सेज दैट the British prioritized control of spice producing regions over the territories. Clear? So I think the passage was very easy to understand, and there was nothing that you need to read between the lines. So everything is so uh, clear, and the flow was very neat and clean. So let us move to the questions and solve them. In the context of the passage, which one of the following conclusions cannot be reached? So it means three conclusions can be reached and one conclusion cannot be reached. So what you have to see? You have to see that three are true and one is false. Okay. So India was colonized for its spices and gold. So beta, here only we can figure it out that, okay, I can say that something or maybe many countries, they were colonized for the spices, but indeed not for the gold. So this word makes this option wrong. Wrong in what sense? It cannot be reached, as we have to go for the false one. But can we draw all these conclusions? Let us verify that. Tobacco was more marketable than spices. Yes, that we saw in the last paragraph. So this can be concluded. It means this is true. The space trade was a driver of colonial expansion. This thing is given in the first paragraph. This is also true. Colonialism was motivated by the demand for prices. This is also given in paragraph 2. So 2, 3 and 4, these are true. It means these three can be concluded, but one cannot be concluded just because of the word gold. Okay, so I think it was very easy. Question 2. It can be inferred that all of the following contributed to a decline in the allure of spices except. So here author is trying to ask us that except question is there. What were the reasons that led to the decline in the allure of spices? मतलब spices की demand कम हो गई है. Except किस वजह से कम नहीं हो सकती है? तो again we have to see one false and three true. Okay. Changes in European cuisine. So suppose if I say that something contributed to a decline in, so European cuisine, basically we talked about this thing that they were trying to balance between both the things, dry spices and the moist fish. So अगर कुछ भी चीज change होता है तो obviously that is going to bring some changes in the European cuisine, and for that reason there might be a downfall in the demand of prices. So I can say yes, this is true. As we have to go for the except one, it means we have to go for the false. It means which is not consistent to the passage. But option 1 is consistent to the passage, so this is true. This cannot be my answer because this is true. I have to go for the false one. The development of refrigeration techniques. Paragraph says that lack of refrigeration, because of the lack of refrigeration, spices were being used as preservatives. तो अगर यहाँ पर डिक्लाइन हो रहा है डिमांड का, तो वो डिक्लाइन कब होगा? व्हेन रेफ्रिजरेशन टेक्निक्स विल बी देयर. सो यस, दिस कैन बी करेक्ट नाउ. ओके. Increase in the availability of prices. Increase in the availability prices. Can we draw this thing? Let's see now. But before going to the right answer, let me also verify changes in the system of medical treatment. Obviously, the author has also talked about the uses or maybe the high price of spices because of the medical properties. So yes, again, this change might be there. So again, this is true. Therefore, third is the false one. Increase in the availability of spices. And one more thing here we can say that basically these three things talks about the demand side and third talks about the supply side. So basically if one talks about the supply side and three talks about the demand side, our question is asking us this thing only, what will lead to the demand of the prices. So therefore the correct answer is going to be 3 because we have to go for the except one, which is the false one. So answer is going to be 3. If a trader brought white peppercorns from India to medieval Europe, all of the following are unlikely to happen except. Again, when except is there, so I can rephrase this question this way, which is likely to happen. So rather than going for unlikely to happen, I can say which is likely to happen. क्या हो सकता है? Okay. Now you see, uh, when in one of the paragraphs we talk about the harvesting of the black peppercorns. और उसके लिए क्या किया गया था? The trees were burnt. Okay. So now, if here the author in the question asks us, if a trader brought white peppercorns from India to medieval Europe, तो अगर white peppercorns लेके आ रहा है medieval Europe से, okay, तो अगर वो इंडिया से लेके आ रहा है टू द मिडिवल यूरोप, इसका मतलब इंडिया इज फार अवे, फाइन, सो ऑब्वियसली इट इज गोइंग टू बी स्केर्स. So Europeans would doubt the story of pepper harvesting, fine. So if you're bringing white peppercorns and in order to bring the black peppercorns, you had to harvest the tree, you had to burn down the tree. So obviously here the author is going to doubt the story of pepper harvesting, because he also raised the question in paragraph, I think in the third last paragraph, where the author was saying that black peppercorn के लिए अगर हमें tree को burn करना पड़ता था, then what about the pink peppercorn or the white peppercorn? So indeed, this can be the answer. This is likely to happen. The price of prices would decrease, beta, any which way. If something is scarce, so obviously the prices of spices would not decrease, because any which way it is scarce, and if something is scarce, it is going to be highly valued or highly priced. So yes, this is false. This is unlikely to happen. Medieval maps would be used as navigational aids. In the passage, the author said that it was being difficult for the people of Europe to locate India on the medieval maps. So obviously, again, this is unlikely to happen. वो अभी भी ऐसा ही होने वाला है. So again, this is false. Pepper would no longer be considered exotic. Why not? अगर if something is scarce, तो obviously वो exotic था और वो अभी भी रहेगा, whether it is black peppercorn or white peppercorn. Again, this is unlikely to happen. So these three are false, and this is likely to happen. So one is going to be the right answer. Okay, so the last question is, in the context of the passage, the people who heard the story of pepper trees being guarded by snakes would be least likely to arrive at the conclusion that. So here the author asks us that which is the conclusion that we cannot arrive, okay, after listening to the story of pepper harvesting. So what did the story tell us? The story बोल रहा था that if you want to harvest the pepper, so obviously the people, they used to burn down the trees, so that they can also get rid of the snakes. So now here the author is saying which is least likely to arrive at the conclusion. So if you are burning down the tree, it is going to be a costly deal, because a tree takes years to grow. So if you are burning the tree every time, it is going to be a costly deal. So let us see now if some costly word is given in my answer choice. So yes, pepper is costly for good reason. Pepper is going to be costly for reason because every time when you are harvesting it, you are burning the tree. So this is something that can be arrived at. This is the conclusion that we can arrive at. So it cannot be my answer, because we have to go for that option which we cannot conclude, right? So this can be concluded, this cannot be the answer. It is no surprise that the pepper supply is so limited. Again, this is something that can be concluded, because obviously if something is being harvested and that too by burning the trees, so why we are doing this? Maybe the spices were scarce. So yes, this can be concluded, this cannot be my answer. It is not advisable to go to India to harvest the pepper themselves. Again, if any tree is surrounded by snakes, so obviously it is not at all advisable to send the people over here there to burn down the trees, because there is a possible risk that snakes might bit them. So again, this is something that can be concluded. So this can be concluded, this can be concluded, this can be concluded. So what is not concluded is, this is why pepper is so hot. Now, let me explain you that why this is least likely to conclude. The reason is, if you are burning down the tree, so yes, we can conclude that if you are burning down the tree, the area around that particular tree might get hot. But pepper itself is getting hot because of burning down the trees. So obviously, this is something which is very vague, and this is something that cannot be concluded. So therefore, the answer is going to be 3. Okay, so all the questions were direct. There was no question which was indirect. If you have understood the passage very clearly, so it was actually possible to answer all the 4 questions. So I am done with today's RC, and I hope you have learned something from today's RC. So if you have any doubt, you can always visit our site or give us a call on this number. Thank you so much. I will come up with another video very soon. Thank you.